Occasionally, you will create forms that have information that the user is required to fill out. Our registration form, for example, will require a username and password to be submitted before the user can register for our site. How we inform the user of this requirement is up to us, but it is fundamental to good form design. One option is to simply write the requirement next to the form element. A more thorough option is to add some type of form validation to your form. Form validation comes in two flavors, server-side and client-side. Server-side validation requires server-side code and is a little outside the scope of this class. Client-side validation uses JavaScript to check the form when it is submitted or if the form element changes to see if everything that is required is filled out properly. If not, the user is then given feedback and an opportunity to correct the form. Dreamweaver has long had client-side validation available in the form of a behavior. The validate form behavior would trigger a simple warning dialog box to inform the user of the error. Although effective, it definitely left something to be desired in the way of presentation. Well, starting with Dreamweaver CS4, Adobe added Spry validation widgets to its capabilities. These widgets allow robust client-side validation that is easy to control and style even if you don't know anything about JavaScript. So if you've been wondering about that hole in our form, we're about to fill it. So I've got the join.html file open from the 12.16 directory, and this middle login area is totally empty. We need to fix that. So go ahead and place your cursor inside that field set and hit return. Now, don't freak out if login information shows down here. Remember, Dreamweaver's just having a hard time display that. That's okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to go up to our form objects, and these little green icons on the right-hand side, those are your Spry validation widgets. The first one we're going to use is a Spry validation text field. I'm going to go ahead and click to add that, and you're going to see the input tag accessibility attributes come up just as you would with any other form element. And that's one of the most popular misconceptions that I want to go ahead and get rid of right here. Some people are under the mistaken impression that a Spry validation form widget is unlike your other form elements. It's not. It is a form element. The only thing that's different is there's a little bit of code wrapped around it that helps the JavaScript know what to do with that specific form element. Okay. So for this ID, we're going to type in user_name. The label is going to be username. So that'll be the username they're able to choose. And the only other thing we're going to change is tab index is going to be 70. I'm going to click OK and place that on the page. Now, just like any other form element, you can style them. So I'm going to go ahead and click the text box to select it. So I'm going to focus right there on that text input. And I'm going to change the class to text. There you go. So that it has the same width and the same layout arrangement as our other text fields. So when you first start out, you won't really see any difference. Now, how do these things differ? Well, you'll see they have a blue outline around them, and we have a blue tab in the upper left-hand corner. Go ahead and click that blue tab. Your Properties Inspector is now going to reflect the properties of your Spry validation widget. For type, I'm just going to grab the pull-down menu and take a look at these options, but for what we're doing here for the username, we're going to allow anything to be typed in. If you needed to filter this, for example, if it needed to be a phone number, or an email address, or a zip code, you can go ahead and do that, and the Spry validation widget will basically look for that type of an object typed into it. We're actually not going to put any constraints on this. We just want it to be required. Now, your form validation field is going to have several preview states based upon the options that you choose. The initial value is going to look like any other text field. However, notice what happens if somebody doesn't fill it out. They're going to get this message. So if you grab the preview state and go down to required, they're going to get this message right here, a value is required. Well, you're free to customize that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the word required in there. I'm going to remove a value is, and I'm going to put brackets on either side of the word required, just like that. So now when it reads required, it'll have those little brackets around it. And it's just a little bit more of a subtle message, if you will. Now, I'm going to be honest with you, sometimes those can be hard to change. For some reason, when you highlight them sometimes, it deletes the entire text field. It can be a little tricky. So just to show you how this is set up within your code, if I switch to a split screen view with this in code, you can see that this text is just sitting right here inside the span tag. So if you wanted to, you could go in code and you could type in anything you wanted to within that span tag, and it would work out just fine. Okay, the next thing I need to set is when I want this to validate. Validation basically is asking you, when should I check? By default, when the form's submitted, the JavaScript is going to check the form element. But you can also say, hey, whenever somebody types in it, and if somebody loses focus. So if they were to click into it and then click off of it, it would validate at that point as well. Okay, cool. I'm going to take it back to its initial state. Then I'm going to place my cursor right out beside the existing form validation and hit return to go down to the next line. Now next we need a password. So I'm going to go up to my validation widgets and I'm going to find the Spry validation password. It is the third item from the right there. I'm going to click on that. And once again, we're going to give this an ID, and this one is going to be PWD, and label is going to be password, : and the tab index for this one is going to be 80. Well, now that we've sort of seen how this works, they can be pretty quick to set up. I'm just going to click the text field, use the properties inspector to give it the text class so that it gets the same width, and then click the blue tab so that I can set my individual properties for this Spry widget. Now here we are going to have some requirements. Each password has to be at least 6 characters long, so I'm going to type in a minimum characters of 6. You can see that triggers the message minimum number of characters not met. I'm going to go through my messages in order. I'm going to grab the preview states and hit required. I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm just going to highlight that, type in a bracket on the either side of that. Click on the tab again. This time I'm going to choose minimum number of characters not met. I'm going to highlight that, and I'm going to change that to must be at least 6 characters. So you can get as descriptive with this as you want. Again, I'm going to put those brackets in there. That's just my kind of way of visually formatting this to be a little bit different. You don't have to use those. I'm just using them from a purely decorative standpoint. Now next, I'm going to preview the valid state. It just happens to be a nice green checkbox, but of course you can change that as well if you want to. Okay, so everything's looking good there. And finally, I'm going to validate that on blur and change as well, and then save the file. Now, as soon as I save this file, I want to point out to you what's going to happen here. All these Spry assets, Spry validation password CSS, the JavaScript, everything required for these form validation widgets is going to be copied to my site. If I don't already have a Spry assets folder, it's going to create one for me in the root directory, and it's going to copy the files there. Now, as long as I maintain the relationship between this file and those files, we're going to be fine. If I upload this site to my remote site, as long as I make sure that those folders stay in the same relation, I'm going to be okay. If I start moving those around without telling Dreamweaver to update the links, it could cause some issues. So as we get towards the close of this particular movie, I'm going to show you how to control where those go with a little bit greater detail. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and I can actually see there's my Spry Assets folder right there. Now, Dreamweaver may come up and tell you that there is a syntax error. That is typically incorrect. It's just kind of a little bug that I don't think they've worked out quite yet. So if you see that in your version, don't worry about it. Everything's okay. I'm going to click right out beside my Spry validation widget, hit return to go down to the next line. And the last validation widget we're going to put on there is a Spry validation confirm. If somebody's going to type in a password, they can't see what they're typing in. So you want to make sure that they didn't make a misspelling or something that's going to cause them not to be able to log into your site. So I'm going to click right here on the Spry validation confirm widget. The ID for this one is going to be confirm. The label for this one is going to be confirm password, and the tab index for that is going to be 90. Once again, we're going to do some very similar things here. I'm going to click on the text field, and using the pull-down menu from my properties inspector, I'm going to assign the text class to it. Then clicking on the blue tab for the Spry confirm widget, I'm going to make sure it's validating against the password. It picks up on that automatically, but you might want to just verify that and make sure that it is. For my preview states, I'm going to go down to required. Again, I'm just going to do the same thing I've been doing. I'm going to surround that in brackets and get rid of any of the other punctuation. And then finally, go down to the invalid. And instead of saying the valids don't match, I'm just going to type in bracket mismatch, comma, please try again. I always like being polite, at least most of the time. There we go. And I'm going to validate that on blur and on change as well. Now I'm going to do a save all. And you'll notice it's going to add even more. So each one of these Spry widgets have their own set of files that it's going to copy over. So you could wait till you've added all these and just add them all at once, or you could do it like we've done it here, which is to do it incrementally. Now, one last thing, guys. We're almost ready to test this, but you'll notice that the default styling for this, sort of a red text with a red box around it, doesn't really match our site. Well, that's okay. The CSS is being driven by these external pages up here, but that's not to say that we can't change them. So here's what we're going to do. I want you to take each one of these and click on the tab for the validation widget and choose one of the required states. It doesn't matter which one, just choose one of the required states. There we go. We're going to go ahead and style these guys all individually by using the Code Navigator, and it's the easiest way to find the targeted selectors that we need. So I'm going to hold down my Alt key and click on this text. On the Mac, you'd want to hold down the Command option. And we're looking not in our CSS, we're looking in Dreamweaver CSS. If you thought our CSS was complicated, look at that. We're going to find these really long group selectors, and you want to click on that. And as soon as you do, it'll jump you into Code View, and these guys are just kind of stacked one on top of each other. We're just going to change the color. I'm going to change it from the CCC to 51341A. That's that brown color. And then for border, I'm just going to change that to none. I've got my brackets, really don't need that border. I'm going to scroll through this code and see if that appears anywhere else, that display inline, color, and border. It doesn't. So we're good in this one. All right, we'll do a save all. I'm going to do the exact same thing again. I'm going to go right over here. I'm going to hold down my Alt key and click. That'd be Command Option on the Mac. Find which of those guys has the display, color, and border properties and click. It'll jump me right to that spot, and all I've got to do is type in that color value. Again, if I was smart, I would have copied it, 51341A, and border of none. There we go. I'll again look through this to make sure that we didn't miss anybody. I think we're okay. We'll do a save all, and we're going to finish it up by going right here and doing it again. So trigger your Code Navigator, find the one with the display, color, and border properties, and just switch those out. So the brown color for that red color, it's 51341A, and a border of none. So, when you're working with any of these Spry objects, the validation widgets included, don't be nervous about going in and changing their CSS. That's why they made these, so that you could go in there and style them the way you wanted them to look. So just because there's a default look to something doesn't mean that you have to be tied to that. So again, go ahead and do a save all, and then let's preview that in our browser and see how that works. So if I go down to this area of the form, if I click in username and just hit tab to ignore it, you'll notice that my browser is now telling me this is required. As soon as I type in a password, it tells me it has to be at least 6 characters, so I can do that. And then if these values don't match, it's going to let me know they don't match, and I just get to keep trying it. So cool. Also notice that the focus on these is exactly the same color, that sort of cream color. So we've got a lot of consistent styling throughout a form, which is exactly what we want. Now, by using Spry validation widgets in your form, you can add rich client-side form validation that guides users through filling out your form. It's worth noting that the JavaScript and CSS used to drive the validation widgets is fully customizable. So changing how the validation notifications are formatted is as easy as changing out the CSS.